Looking up at the massive, creeping steel beams of a modern observation wheel, the experience is entirely different from a roller coaster. It moves with a quiet, deliberate momentum. But the very first gigantic observation wheel was built under immense geopolitical pressure. It was conceived as a high-risk engineering dare. To trace how that happened, you have to look back centuries to places like Bulgaria and the Middle East. Early rotating rides were tiny, wooden contraptions turned by hand or sometimes pulled by animals. They were temporary distractions meant for local festivals. Nobody at the time imagined scaling up a wooden spinning chair into a gigantic, permanent monument of national pride. That ambition began here, at the 1889 World's Fair in Paris. The unveiling of this rigid, towering iron lattice, the Eiffel Tower, stunned the globe. It became the immediate, dominating symbol of modern industrial power. 4 years later, the United States was desperate to prove its own industrial supremacy. As organizers laid out these massive, opulent domed pavilions for the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition, they needed a centerpiece. The American organizers set a strict constraint. The new structure had to equal the awe of the French monument, but they absolutely refused to build a static tower. Copying Paris was out of the question. This demand for an entirely original attraction created an architectural vacuum. To fill it, organizers needed a design that completely ignored the established rules of 19th century engineering. The man who stepped into that vacuum is tied to structures like the one in this photograph. George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. was an expert in structural steel and bridge construction, entirely removed from the world of carnival entertainment. He proposed building a colossal, continuously spinning metal wheel that would stand taller than the average skyscraper. Looking at the physics, the scientific community of the 1890s called the idea suicidal. As you can see in this stress diagram, hanging massive boxes filled with people hundreds of feet in the air creates immense dynamic forces. Gravity and rotational stress would constantly threaten to pull a circular structure of that size apart. But Ferris understood the high tensile strength, the resistance to breaking under tension, of late 19th century steel. He designed a tension spoke system similar to a bicycle wheel. These interconnected steel spokes radiating from the hub safely absorbed those dynamic loads and kept the rim perfectly intact. The final completed machine was a staggering 264 feet tall. Look at the size of these rectangular passenger cars hanging from the rim. There were 36 of them, each capable of holding 60 people, meaning the wheel could carry over 2,000 passengers at once. By applying the strict mathematical laws of bridge engineering to a moving object, Ferris scaled a simple wooden festival toy into an industrial leviathan. When the machine began turning at the 1893 fair, the crowds on the ground were caught between intense terror and overwhelming excitement. Airplanes had not been invented yet. Even ordinary skyscrapers were a rarity for the average citizen. Almost no one had ever been that high above the earth. But once passengers stepped aboard, the heavy steel rotated smoothly and silently. It gave 19th century citizens their very first sensation of sustained flight, offering a completely new aerial perspective of the world. The safe, continuous operation of the wheel proved the absolute dominance of American steel construction. Despite its massive popularity, the original machine faced a brutal economic reality. Its monumental size made it a financial nightmare to maintain, dismantle, and relocate. After a final move to St. Louis for the 1904 World's Fair, the towering prototype was ultimately demolished in 1906 using controlled explosives. The physical machine was gone, but its engineering DNA survived. Cities around the world immediately rushed to build their own giant observation wheels, kicking off a global race for the skyline. Ferris shattered the idea that grand architecture had to be stationary. He proved that a monument could actually be kinetic. Looking at this photograph of a modern, hubless observation wheel, you can see how the foundational concept endures. Even as the aesthetics modernize, the core mechanics are practically identical to the 1893 original. Most late 19th century technologies have been completely replaced or forgotten over the last century, yet this specific machine continues to be built in major cities. It survives because of how it moves. In an increasingly chaotic and fast-paced world, it offers a deliberately engineered space for slow reflection. What started as a heavy metal geopolitical rivalry ultimately gifted humanity a timeless machine